Well, Ned, I'm excited. That's the best promotion I've had in a long time. I'm actually a social scientist, not a data scientist. Just not good enough at maths, basically.
Cool. Well, welcome everyone to Data Chess or Data Poker, thinking in bets for data teams. So our goal today is to introduce to you a new way of thinking about the investment of your time and resources. In other words, how you make decisions. And if nothing else, we're going to work out who are the chess players and who are the poker players.
And if nothing else, I will desperately try to avoid the controversy of having a topic that is probably the most inopportune time to be talking about chess and strategy. Those of you who are interested in chess and chess masters will understand a completely new definition of SQL injection. But this is us, isn't it? We've spent the last 982 days locked down at ThoughtWorks because we joined at the time of the pandemic, trying to solve intractable human problems with technology.
That's right. I'm Ned. I'm a data science engineer at ThoughtWorks as part of our data and AI practice, where we help our partners design and build data products and also uplift their data strategy to make more effective use of their data. And over my time in my data career, I've come to the conviction that we need to take a step back from the decision-making coalface and reflect on how we improve the quality of our decision-making processes.
I'm not a data scientist, but or a data engineer. I do love data, and I still hear and go, oh my goodness, maybe that's the new version of the only language I'm endorsed on LinkedIn for, which is Fortran, which tells you a little bit about my age, but very disappointed it wasn't. For my sins, a former executive. So I worked at REA Group. I was the CIO and head of research and development. I worked at Lonely Planet as the head of technology there in the last 10. I've spent a lot of other people's money trying to figure out what to do with strategy. So startups, scale-ups, and a number of screw-ups along the way. Social scientist, a behavioral economist kind of thing, which means I talk fast and wave my hands well. You know, social scientists are the ones with the worst reputation, a complete inability to repeat any experiment we create at all. But I am most fascinated by the ethics and social, the political dimensions of data, the things you create and the messes I get into as a result.
Right, let's jump in.
Yeah, so the stakes are considerable. That's what I've learned in my career. And I go back to going to America in 2000, probably the dot-com revolution was fantastic. An Australian company, a startup called ePredicts, and was in the field of psychometric testing, which is really, you'd call it AI today, it's just called statistics back in those days. What we were doing was building incredibly predictive algorithms about who would make a good software engineer, bus driver, nurse, truck driver, all those kind of things. And using data, vast quantities, 40 years of data sets. And the psychometric tests, 5 factors. You probably know the 5-factor model and algorithm. It's extroversion, neuroticism, agreeableness, conscientiousness, and openness to experience. And combinations of those will predict who's going to make a great employee. And those are 2 case studies I'm quite familiar with, not responsible for, but quite familiar with, where Kmart, bankrupt twice in 40 years, went from a massive company to a very unsuccessful retailer. Not coincidentally, they had changed their employment. The 5 factors, they'd reweighted for the managers a little bit more extroversion and a little bit less conscientiousness to try and get them to sell more. And the resulting kind of behavioral changes were massive. Two bankruptcies. Wow, that was an interesting thing to observe. And then in my time in America, and Wells Fargo were a client, they adjusted famously their algorithm to get a little more extroversion and help their tellers sell more accounts. And if you Google that one, you'll know how that turned out. How about you, Ned?
Yeah, well, jumping onto this other example here, this one might be, maybe some of you had some experiences with this one. This is the, to some degree, hopefully not too much, but this is the shiny new data platform that's been envisioned to pull data from across your organization, clean it, curate it, make it available for everyone to consume, self-serve to their heart's content. But over time, it's become a dark and murky data swamp, and people are making ad hoc tables, extracts, the provenance and context of which are unclear, and we're starting to see lower trust in data. So how did it get this way? Well, there were probably, just like in Nigel's scenario, lots of decisions made along the way, or not made, that helped contribute to this situation. So
I think the stakes are high for people in this room. Not as shiny as an ab's view of an incredible data structure, is it at all?
So when it comes to making decisions, we want to ask you a question. Which persona are you? When you need to make a decision, which record do you put on? Do you put on Mary Curie, the scientist, or do you put on Kenny Rogers, the gambler? Now, I suspect that a lot of us here are probably going to align more with the scientist persona. We value gathering data, experimentation, measuring uncertainty, A/B tests, thinking slow. We'd rather not align with the gambler, someone who maybe gets high on making high-stake bets in the face of radical uncertainty. But Nigel and I want to challenge this perception. And I guess to do that, think about an expert poker player. In order for them to be successful, not only do they have to master the rules of the game, but they also have to make fast-paced decisions under uncertainty, where they're balancing their investment with their risk. And so there's a lot of parallels here with the practical realities of driving and supporting an organization. We don't always have the luxury of being able to rigorously de-risk every decision. Making decisions under uncertainty is inevitable, and sometimes we do just have to think fast. Now, we're not trying to convince you to put on a waistcoat and sit down at the casino. What we are trying to argue is that poker players have a lot to teach us about making decisions under uncertainty.
There's a lot of people in the room, in their heads going, you got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, and that's probably all they'll take away from our talk now, Ned.
Right. But before we get to that, we want to talk a bit about some of the types of decisions that we're involved in as data practitioners.
Yeah, and this is me, this is my realm, We put out the bat signal for the scientists to come and the engineers to come and save us with some data. Part of the problem is we did enough at university to be dangerous. We actually are quite enamored by the science of probability, for example. So I've spent my 20 years as an executive in organizations asking people like Ned, well, Ned, what's the damn probability? Give me the probability of this market coming back before next year. And then just pressuring you into going 62.5% and me believing that. And that harnessing of data to make business decisions is a real problem area because the stakes are so high. I'm asking you to think fast. And, as someone famously said, predictions are hard, especially about the future. So if I think of one particular example I'm involved with, you'll be able to pick who it was with. Our nightmare, our problem running this giant multi-billion-dollar business was trying to predict the volume of the sales that we were making. All we wanted to do was figure out how many houses would come onto the Australian market for sale next month. 6 data scientists and a team of engineers, 9 months, $1 million, 3,000 variables, and we're so excited as the executive team, we're going to get the answer. We can now steer our ship for hiring and advertising and all these things to match our exact market. No result. Now that's not unusual, but in a world where we wanted to offload our sense of uncertainty and our discomfort with navigating without all the data, we did put a huge amount of pressure on data people. And I think that's taxing for data people. There's a bit of a history to this, right? It's like 2,000 years ago, the Greeks were going off to the soothsayers to try to find out from them what on earth was going to happen in the future. So executives have been doing this for a long time. And it is to do with our discomfort with uncertainty. We would rather invent certainty and live with the consequences than say, I don't know. And we've been doing that for a long time, whether it's the Greeks or whether it was simulmatics in the 1960s. That's the forerunner to Cambridge Analytica, trying to figure out what election results will be. And when working out there were correlations, trying to influence those damned elections. Trump would have loved those people. But that the unburdening of an executive mind onto your mind, so you bring logic and probability and data to the table, it's very appealing to me. And so I guess I'd probably say, don't do it, especially in these increasingly volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous kind of times. That I don't know is much more the answer. And I love Dr. Linda Hill's work, a good podcast on being data-driven, which is what I hear it still today. It's an embarrassing thing. I go into executive meetings, we must be data-driven. Linda Hill says, no, data-informed is a much better thing, and the politics of this have become considerable. Because to be data-driven, sort of takes all of the responsibility outside yourself. And hey, data-driven, I sound way cooler than you. And that's political. That's me, and I'm offloading that onto Ned.
And so more recently, we have the alluring account of Moneyball, the story of Billy Beane, the general manager of the Oakland Athletics, who brought data and metrics to baseball for the first time, transforming an underperforming and under-resourced team into a powerhouse.
We all want Moneyball as executives, I can tell you that.
Right. So the appeal for execs, and I know they've all watched it. You've got it on DVD, don't you?
No, I have it on VHS, young man. I'm a boomer.
The appeal is that there's low-hanging data fruit just sitting out there that we can pick up and start getting an immediate competitive advantage. But of course, the reality is, just as in baseball, this has just become part of the standard playbook. And if we're not already using data to inform how we make decisions effectively, we need to start just to catch up.
There's a data engineer 100 years ago, a guy called H.L. Menck, and a very cynical guy said, for every complex problem, there is a solution that is clear, simple, and wrong.
So this brings us to the second type of decisions that as data practitioners we're involved in, and we might, people in the room might relate to a little bit more here. This is around how we make effective use of our data to support our organization's North Star goals. So as data teams, our mandate is to empower folks to make their business decisions with timely, relevant, and accurate information from teams like product analytics, partnerships, sales and finance, growth. And it's also, often to enable data science engineering teams with the infrastructure, services, and data required to build high-quality data-powered products. So,
wow.
As data practitioners, we need to make decisions all the time about how we design, build, and run the information factory that meets the needs of our organization. Here are some examples of concrete decisions that we might have to make as data practitioners. Which data warehouse should we use? Do we need a streaming platform? If so, which one? Which BI tool should we standardize around? Do we want to jump on the analytics engineering bandwagon and adopt DBT? What about our data science teams? Which ML tool should they use, PyTorch or TensorFlow? And what about MLOps tools? Do we want any of them to help improve the way we manage the lifecycle of ML products?
And we know the correct answer, whatever looks best on LinkedIn.
That's it. Resume-driven development.
Yep.
And then, I've heard about this metrics layer thing. Do we want one of them? And of course, cutting across all these decisions is the perennial, should we build or buy? Now, these are important data strategy decisions. We saw before with Zainab's talk that spaghetti mess that we want to absolutely avoid. We really do want to build it once and build it right. But getting it right is hard. Up here we're looking at, evidence of the fact that we've seen a Cambrian explosion of tools and services in recent times. This is Matt Turk's ML, AI, and data landscape of 2021. And well, look, it's amazing that we have such a large range of tools and services to choose from. But with many of them offering nuanced feature sets, different trade-offs, strengths and weaknesses, it's not always, well, it's often the case that some are going to be better fits for the needs of our organization and our current tech stack than others. And we also know very well that implementing these things, even just adding a new service to our current stack, takes a lot of considerable time and effort. And there can also be a path dependency to these decisions. Earlier tooling options we might choose may kind of rule out or make other ones that turns out we'd prefer harder. So all these factors combine to mean that we can't always take as rigorous an experimental approach as we'd like when choosing tooling and architectures.
I did enjoy on Zanab's slide that at the end point there was a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. As someone who grew up doing this entire thing in Lotus 1, 2, 3, this explosion is incredibly difficult. And the part of the drama is social science, is that how dumb do you feel when you chose the wrong thing? And you go down a dead end, or you buy into something and then Amazon Web Services offers it for free the next year and you have to ring up your open source mates and go, sorry, we can't buy that anymore from you because Amazon's chucking it in. Bless them.
Okay, so we're jumping to another type of decision here. This one's around data strategy supporting product strategy. And so this is one that I'm seeing coming up a fair bit, where people are asking, hey, could we use a chatbot to improve our product? And it's a compelling thing that we might think about because, text generation technologies have come a long way in the last few years. We've seen these massively, performant large language models producing quite fascinating and impressive output. But there's a bit of an unsolved problem that we have, which is around preventing it from hallucinating complete fantasy and also, spitting out abusive content that we don't want to expose to our customers or, let alone anyone. So we have some examples here. Here we have Meta's Blender bot, where it's happily informing us that Trump is serving a second term, and it's also owning up to the fact that there's a whole bunch of fake news on Facebook, which is not really a great look for Meta or Facebook. This other one over here is a fun example. This has happened a bit recently on Twitter. A remote job board company released a Twitter bot that listens to people posting about remote jobs and then replying to something on topic of what they're saying with a sort of a chirpy, upbeat comment about remote work. People worked out, though, that what the bot's doing is having that tweet fed into the prompt of the language model in its entirety, so making it vulnerable to prompt injection attacks, kind of like SQL injection attacks. And you can get it to do all sorts of things. So here we have someone convincing the bot to make a false accusation about a US politician. And over here we have a pretty fun one. Someone's actually managed to convince the bot to spit out the initial instructions that it was programmed with, revealing the sort of, sensitive details of what's going on.
And so this is what happens when people with IQs north of 120 get tools like the data science tools we saw. Unbelievable.
Right. So all of this sort of really goes to show, in particular when we're adopting these sort of, quite exciting, shiny and, cutting-edge ML and AI techniques, it's super important that we understand the pronounced risks before we make decisions about incorporating it into our products.
I love the way you type that, should we, because I think that's a really good question, because most often I'm asking, can we, or when can we, and you've phrased it perfectly.
So this brings us to our hypothesis. Now that we've talked about the types of decisions that we need to make and the importance of getting them right, we want to ask the question, how can we as data practitioners make better decisions? We want to be that scientist, and that's great. But Nigel and I are encouraging you to also embrace the gambler persona. And that's not because we should be reckless, YOLO important decisions and bet the farm, but it's because we think that poker players have a lot to teach us about making decisions under uncertainty.
Now, when we say our hypothesis, that's a complete lie. It's Annie Duke's hypothesis, which we love. Incredible author, an incredible story of a woman who left university, had an unfinished degree she needed to fund, and spent the next few years with her brother becoming a professional poker player. She then went back to university, did a PhD, and now teaches in a school of management, applying the rules of poker to the world of big decision-making and strategy. And it's a tremendous book.
Yeah, great book. Definitely recommend reading it. But why are decisions bets? I think Annie Duke says it best herself, so I'm just going to read from the book. By treating decisions as bets, poker players explicitly realize they are deciding on alternative futures, each with benefits and risks. Every decision commits us to some course of action that by definition eliminates others. So when we make decisions, we are betting against all future versions of ourselves that we are not choosing.
I'm disappointed she didn't say every hand's a winner and every hand's a loser, but then I am a music fan, so that would be me. And so the essence of it is this applies to both kinds of decisions, the big executive business strategy decisions and the the incredibly important ones around data strategy. So let's have a look at what her hypothesis and our hypothesis, which we love as well, is that strategy is not about chess. Now I'm guessing this is a room of chess players. I'm a chess player. I'm a slow thinker. It's very difficult for me to play poker. Everyone gets very annoyed. And so chess is a game of skill, and chess contains no hidden information, no magical movement of pieces from the board. The little black square doesn't hold up and your queen falls through it. There's no dice involved. If you can know enough, you can know the entire layout. Everyone knows the rules. It's a completely transparent playing field. And so it's really just algorithmic computation, which is why chess games, like the one that was on the homepage of our slide, why they became vogue decades ago. That one's a tandy. You can buy that in the 1980s from Radio Shack in the United States. And there's always an optimal move in every situation from here. And so that effectively, you've got this tight correlation between your decision and the outcome. Though it's well known after hundreds and hundreds of years of chess. Poker, in comparison, is still a game of strategy, but a game of luck. That you do not have all the information. The other players around the table are holding cards you can't hope to know. There is a random nature of what's going to come next to you, and it's rapid decision making under uncertainty over time. It's risk, and you have to guess and include the other player's mental states into your estimates, which is, this is not sounding very attractive if you're going to try and put that into a formula on a computer. You can make the very best decisions and still lose. You can have a crappy hand of cards and win at poker. And these are some of the things we think really do start to apply in this kind of decision making. So you'll know that a computer program that could beat Annie Duke, for example, was really not in the market until very, very recently, which explains that sort of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity angles of playing poker. So, decision making, not chess, poker. You're all going to be getting a little poker app so you can practice your decision making.
Yeah, so let's lean into that a bit more. Because when we're making strategic decisions, we almost never have complete information. We're making decisions under uncertainty. Because just like in poker, the outcomes of our decisions are based on skills, which is to say the beliefs we have about the world, and also luck. Our strategic decisions don't play out on the vacuum of a chessboard, but rather they're enmeshed in a dynamic and messy world, which we largely don't have control over. But that's not to say that we should just give up and roll the dice. There's things that we can do. We can improve our skills, which is to say better calibrate our beliefs about the world. We can also get better at understanding and measuring the uncertainty involved. And when it comes to assessing the quality of our decision making, we can also disentangle the role of skill and luck, so that we don't confuse, the outcome of a result of a decision we make as being down to, good decision-making skills, when actually it could have just been the result of good luck. So let's dig into this skill versus luck thing a little bit more. So I want you to imagine that you're on a data team, and you've made a few decisions that unfortunately haven't really panned out that well for you. So let's think about, in these scenarios, how much the role of skill versus luck came into play. So scenario one, after a whole lot of research, experimentation and research, you've gone all in on an open source data processing tool. Unfortunately, after about 12 months of using it and enjoying it, you're starting to see that the industry is a little bit less excited about this tool, and also there's some warning signs about the health of the open source project. What do we think about this situation? Skill or luck? Is this something where if we'd put more upfront research into the backers of the open source project, we could have seen those warning signs up front? Or is this just one of the inevitable risks of sometimes adopting an open source project? Scenario number two, you plan out the next quarter of work for your team, committing to a chunky investment in upgrading and putting some enhancements on your data platform that are much needed, only to find 2 weeks into the quarter that there's a new product feature going live and your data team is urgently needed to support it, so you have to drop work on the upgrade. What about this scenario? Is this skill or luck? Well, maybe if we'd had better communication internally and we'd known that this feature was coming up, then possibly that was a problem of skill and information. But also, sometimes this is just sort of one of the risks that we take on working in a fast-paced product company. Scenario number three, your team adopts a new vendor solution your team adopts a new vendor solution needed for a crucial data product, only to find after 6 months of development that it turns out it's missing a crucial feature that you need, making it not fit for purpose. So you have to go find another tool and do a whole bunch of rework for the integration. How do we feel about this one? Skill or luck? I feel like in this case, this is probably more down to the skill side of things. I think, it's, as we all know, it's important to do rigorous requirements analysis up front, but I'm sure there are folks out there who have been in this situation who really just unfortunately had to learn it the hard way.
I think you've scarred a few people, Ned, with that. Like, going, how does he know about my business? How does he know about my team? But I think a really good way of getting back into that poker mindset is let's do a little game. So what I want you to, then we're going to try and get a few poker skills along the way here. So what I want you to think about is, what is the worst decision you made in the last year? The worst decision. Just have a think about that for a couple of seconds. Go, yeah, that was a dumb one. That was terrible. I shouldn't have done that. That's good. Okay. So now, don't tell your neighbor, because we don't want to embarrass anyone, all those kind of things. But I'm pretty confident what you've actually done is figured out very quickly something that turned out really badly. So my worst decision of my life was to marry my wife. Now, it is the best outcome of my life. 35 years later, our success as a family with travel and all of the things that, textbook fairy tale stuff. Incredible outcome. That intuitive, instinctive, dumb decision by a 24-year-old with no context, and we were married within 6 months of first meeting, that's a terrible decision-making process that I counsel my children to not do. And that's Annie Duke's point. That's called resulting. You're associating an outcome with the quality and skill of your decision. And when you're a poker player and you have a bad outcome with your cards, you take that, oh, I'm a shit decision maker, I'm a terrible poker player, you take that into the next hand, which is only happening 2 minutes later. And we are all doomed to do this. And it's key in separating these two in your practice as data engineers to learn to separate those two things.
So, why should data teams think in bets? Well, as we've been arguing, this is effectively what you're doing when you're making a decision. You're putting resources on the line and committing to one course of action against all the other ones. In effect, you're betting against the alternative, the future versions of yourselves that you didn't choose. But what are the benefits of leaning into this framing? Well, first of all, it encourages us to bring data to the table when we're making decisions. It also requires us to make explicit and socialize our uncertainty, which is, keeping us honest. And it also helps us to match our investment with the degree of risk. It also helps our team learn more effectively from the outcomes of our decisions. We're better able to see when a positive outcome is the result of skill rather than luck. And also, another one is that bets can be readily aligned with your organization's North Star goals. When adopted holistically, a structured framework based around making decisions as bets is a powerful tool for promoting organizational alignment. So Nigel, how can we get started?
Well, 3 cards. I think we should give our players 3 powerful cards to hold. And first card is from Annie Duke. And it's Annie Duke's inspiration to a little company called Spotify, who needed to reset the way they made business decisions. They needed a level playing field. They needed some new letters because they used to have HIPPO as their decision making, the highest paid person's opinion. And they needed to level that playing field. And what they did to avoid the waste they were experiencing around decisions was implement DEBs, which is hard for a Kiwi to say. It sounds like dubs, that's music, DEBs. Data, insight, belief, bet. You want something to get on the slate, whether that's a data science project or some product feature in the consumer side of their apps, you need to present this. What data have you observed that you think is relevant to the case? And what's your insight? So the humans don't go away. It's not all handed over to the robots to have the insights. This 3.5 inches becomes useful at this point to go, and the case they particularly talk about, they have many, is noticing in the data of their users in 2016 that users were migrating from desktop to mobile. The insight was, wow, if that continues, we have so few mobile developers, we're in trouble. The belief, the hypothesis, and maybe a number they could switch was, do you know what, we better get started on this. Recruitment's going to be hard in New York. Why don't we see if people are willing to change their careers through training and development? And we'll know it if we get actually our own people applying for mobile developer jobs. And the bet was they would run a course with people having time off, able to invest in new skills, and the learning loop would be, let's see what we learn from that. So they ran a first tranche through. And I've seen it used in a number of different places now. This is a very sensible methodology for figuring it out and how things could work.
So let's make it a bit more relatable to folks here in the room, bring it home a bit. Let's imagine we're a data team and we're going to make some bets using the DIBs process. So let's jump in. We'll start with our data point, which is that it's taking a whopping 150 hours a month to produce some consolidated product reporting. And we're getting periodic issues of reports of inconsistencies in these reports. So that's our data. Our insight is that this is costing us money and opportunity cost for doing more high-value work than Excel wrangling, and that all that manual work is causing these issues in the reports. Our belief is that adopting a new reporting tool that has more automation involved is going to reduce the amount of time it takes to make these reports and also help fix the data inconsistencies in the reports. So that then informs our bet. Well, the belief. Wait, which one did I just do?
I think you had a hypothesis.
I had a hypothesis. Yeah, cool. Our bet is that we're going to trial a thin slice of one of the more complex reports, committing 3 people from our data team and time from 2 product analysts for 3 weeks.
It so resonates with me, this case study, because so many times I've had a colleague at an executive level go, what we need is a dashboard. Can you get your data scientists to produce an incredible dashboard? And you know what? 99% of dashboards I've seen, ignored. And it's a tragedy. It is an incredible waste. So what's the loop back of that?
Yes,
I guess.
So let's fast forward in time. We've done the trial. We've run it for a couple of months. We're ready to do this learning loop and actually feed back the outputs from that bet into the next loop. So the data point from that is going to be that it turns out that this new report is actually reducing the amount of time. The new reporting tool is reducing the amount of time it takes to build. But we're still seeing inconsistencies in the reports. So the insight that we come from that is that the reporting tool is great, but we think that the data quality issues are coming from upstream in the data warehouse. So our belief is that uplifting the data modeling process in the warehouse is going to help address these issues. The bet we're going to make is that let's commit a squad now from the data team and time from those analysts to uplift the tables needed for modeling for that report into DBT. So hopefully you're getting the idea of this process. We can imagine if we went to do a third time round, we'd make a bigger bet and try and bring all the reports into DBT and the new reporting tool.
Yeah, this is definitely our Queen of Hearts. And Spotify call it a framework for an argument.
On to card number 2 for you to hold. Something you might have picked up on the previous scenario is that as we went through the loop, the size of our bets increased each time. This is because with each iteration we get more data, which feeds into more insights, which increases the confidences of success. Just like in poker, we need to adjust the amount that we're betting based on our confidence in our hand. We can summarize this as the maxim, make bets that are proportionate with your degree of uncertainty. So Nigel, practical point, and I think we need to be quick.
Yep.
How can we get started?
So the simplest thing is that this is all about behavior and culture. This is where the social scientist overlaps in this talk, is that if you want to start working in this kind of way, start using the language. The language is the pivotal part of a new culture of thinking in this way. If you are in a place that's psychologically safe to say, I don't know, you're starting in a great place. But just by pitching this as I don't know, but here's an experiment we can do, you change the game. And you talk about doing, this is a great axiom, because I've spent my career making the biggest bets at the point in time I had the least amount of information, whether that was M&A or otherwise. And yeah, look, if you can actually imagine yourself talking about bets in your organization, then that's your simplest of starting points.
And on to card number 3, our final card to offer you. As you repeat your decision-making process, the outputs from previous decision feed back into new data into the next iteration. And this, but in order to do this effectively, we need to cultivate the ability to distinguish luck from skill in order to push the right feedback back into our learning loops. Now, there's other names for these types of learning loops. As Nigel can tell us, in Lean, we have plan, do, study, act.
Yeah, William Edwards Deming, famous for saying, in God we trust, all others bring data.
And in Agile, we also have the idea of validated learning. And a question some of you might be thinking was, well, isn't all of this just Agile? And yeah, I think in a way there's some truth to that. But it's a different way of framing the iterative value-oriented process.
Yeah, and this is good agile. And unfortunately, the world's adopted all sorts of other weird acronyms, and it's not good agile. This was the intent of the founders of that movement back in the 1980s.
So we argue that by adopting a structured approach to framing our decisions as bets, it forces us to bring data to the table when making decisions. It forces us to be explicit about the knowledge and beliefs that informs a bet, while being transparent about the uncertainty that we hold. And doing this keeps us honest. It means that we're less likely to misattribute good outcomes from the result of a good decision when it was actually just luck. We strongly believe that if everyone leans into this approach, it will start to change how your teams and your organizations make decisions for the better. And it also offers a practical on-ramp into how we can actually start to become the learning organization that we all aspire to be.
Well, not much left to do, Ned, other than send you out into the world to go and place some bets, I guess. And you're lucky you're placing bets with other people's money. It's quite uncomfortable when it's your own money in startups. And look, here actually, I love this. This is code from GitHub of one of the first open source poker playing very complex algorithmic solutions to doing it. So it's taken a long time to happen.
So remember, everyone, the 3 cards that we've given you to hold. 1, think in bets. Use a structured framework like DIBs. 2, make bets that are proportionate with your degree of uncertainty. And 3, calibrate your beliefs by pushing the right feedback into your learning loops.
And a little bit of extra homework now too. Lots of our own books there, like just call out the ThoughtWorks. You probably have, the t-shirts don't have it on the front much, but come by, have a chat there's a chance to win Shamark's book. And these are lots of my kind of weirdo things from the past that I've read that have been very inspiring to making the work that you do land for the most effect and the least waste in the organizations you work for.
So thanks very much for listening, and yeah, we'd love to get your feedback and any questions if we have time.